just as a reminder, this session is being recorded. So once we have a replay available, we will share it with the broader community. So just to get started, I want to start out obviously by welcoming everyone and thank you all for joining the latest installment of our Powering Business with Blockchain series. For those of you who may be new to this series, during these sessions, we really like to host leaders and executives from across different industries to really discuss how they're thinking about blockchain technology in the context of their businesses, their industries, their pain points, and what they're looking to accomplish. Also, how their efforts have evolved and grown over time, as well as ultimately showcasing real use cases in the space. By way of introduction, I'm Morgan Krupetsky, Director of Business Development for Institutions and Capital Markets at Ava Labs. I'm joined by our VP of Business Development, John Nahas, today, as well as our featured guests, Steve Sophia CEO and co-founder, and Sophia Lopez, president and co-founder of Kaleido. I'm really excited that we get to use this session to focus more on the infrastructure side of things, with Kaleido really providing comprehensive enterprise-grade blockchain solutions, really for a whole host of different industries, companies, and use cases. I know you both, actually all three of you, have been at this for a while, and we'll use this session to really get into your observations of how you've seen the industry and business adoption of blockchain evolve over the years. What's worked, what might be some lessons learned from past pitfalls, as well as how you guys work and engage with various companies today to get to production with their on-chain solutions as quickly and successfully as possible. So first, let's just start off with an easy one. Would love to have you guys, introduce yourselves, tell us a bit about your backgrounds, and then we'll get into Kaleido and all the things that you offer as part of that product set. Sophia, maybe you want to go first.
Thanks. So thanks again, Morgan and John, for inviting us. And it's been a fun journey so far, and much more to come. So yeah, introduction. So Sophia Lopez, I'm one of the founders of Kaleido, along with Steve. We actually both started back in the blockchain space. We've been here at Kaleido for 6 years. We started 2 years prior at IBM, so in 2015. So enterprise blockchain has really been around for about 8 years at this point. I spoke at an event in Paris on the state of enterprise adoption, was reflecting a little bit. 2015 is when the Linux Foundation first set up Hyperledger. Then you had R3 set up the distributed ledger group. And then, enterprise Ethereum was basically born that year as well. So I think a lot of people were looking at the technology in the enterprise space, and companies were saying, hey, there's something here that we can use, and started, launching lots of projects, which really became a first generation approach to building. While we were at IBM, we launched the world's first blockchain managed service, the first open source blockchain community targeted for enterprise, and a lot of lessons about, those first generation approaches of building that we then, left and said, Web3 is a lot bigger. We want to offer flexibility and choice. So started Kaleido about 6 years ago, with funding from a co-founder for one of the key ecosystems in the time. And I think tons of learnings we could share, but as an intro, that's a little bit about our background. Maybe Steve, you'd like to add some more?
Yeah, hi everyone, Steve Cerveny. Really excited for the participation of the group here today, and to be talking about these really interesting, important topics. Look forward to the discussion. Just by way of introduction, my background's really in core distributed systems, enterprise transaction processing, and emerging technology. As you can imagine, blockchain is the biggest innovation in that space in quite a long time. Like I said, been working in the space since 2015. So have seen a lot along the technologies, approaches, ecosystems that are being created. to deliver the fundamental promise of possible with technology.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both for joining. I'm really excited to dive in and hear pearls of wisdom from all of your perspectives. And so like you guys mentioned, the team has been at this for a long time now. As an infrastructure partner, tell us a little bit about how you're helping to, as the name of the webinar suggests, power businesses with blockchain. Specifically, a little bit more about Kaleido, the type of support and infrastructure and product offerings that you offer, and the types of clients that you work with. I know, enterprises and institutions, but what does that mean? What is kind of the ground that you guys cover? Let's start with that just to level set.
Yeah, sure. So Kaleido as a company, our mission, our day one mission has been to help enterprises come online in Web3. And we feel like it's in a lot of ways, it's still day one. We're still early days, of course, in this big transformation. But Sophia mentioned we worked a couple of years before starting Kaleido, and the big aha I would say is just how hard it is for a company, a large enterprise, let's say, to really get going and get their first use case. I'm not talking about a POC. I'm talking about getting through all the way into production. There's just a lot of new technologies, protocols, programming languages. These are remote systems, so connecting. There's infosec and security, and it just touches on a lot of different technology domains. And then there's sort of the knowledge on the business side as well. Kaleido, you mentioned, is an infrastructure company. So our technology suite, we think of it in three basic layers. There's the chain infrastructure itself, which I think is obvious to people, doesn't need a lot of description. But sitting on top of that is a middleware stack. And the fact that a blockchain system is its own transaction processing, it sort of works at its own speed, it's doing its own thing. And the reality is there's lots of apps and other systems that need to stay in sync and need to integrate with that. And so integration and transaction orchestration are actually really significant hurdles and challenges. And so the second layer is that middleware stack. And then sitting on top of that are what we call our asset platform. These are tools and services that are purpose built to help accelerate and solve different pieces of the puzzle. So whether that's wallets and key management or policy engine, or tokenization services, different support and templates for different sorts of assets. So that's sort of the technology suite, and what we've seen is blockchain, if you're going to build an application, it's a full stack problem. So you really need to consider and have a solution in place for each of those layers of the stack, and we can help with that.
And maybe just to add on to that, and Sophia, maybe you can answer this question. I'd say two things. One, again, I think in our conversations that we've had, you've given examples of your work with really a whole breadth of different types of industries, from financial services to healthcare and individual, like Fortune 500s, and kind of everything in between. So would love to hear a little bit more about kind of that breadth of clients that you guys cover, as well as how it is that you engage with clients. Would love to kind of hear your perspective on that, because I think different partners that we've run into have different levels of expertise, have been at this for different periods of time, and are staffed and resourced in very different ways. So would love to hear your perspective in terms of potentially how you partner with various clients on your side. And then maybe, John, if you want to kind of chime in on the same, and we can kind of triangulate what that tri-party partnership looks like.
Yeah, well, we, as you mentioned, we were horizontal platforms. We work across all industries. We do see, a variety of use cases, dozens of use cases that can be applicable. Some of these are actually crossing, more of a horizontal play, like supply chain or sustainability, ESG. But if you look at any particular industry, we're working with like the Fortune 50 names in those industries. And they can be at different stages using different approaches. Some like really understand the problem they're trying to solve, know what the, know the problems of their as-is system, know what the to-be looks like. And for them, it's just like, let's get right into production. It's more of like the Big Bang approach. And we're a great partner for that. We're SOC 2 Type 2 compliant right out of the box for them, ISO 27K. Steve gave his background, I've spent a decade at IBM and had multi-billion-dollar portfolios working with these largest clients in the world on enterprise systems. So we really know like the information security, the compliance, the risk, and then just, their internal processes to get something live, what that looks like. And then very importantly, after they get live, they need help, they need enterprise support. So we're, running these different technologies. The Web3 space, it's really a plug and play stack of like open source tech. But enterprises, like real companies, need a vendor or someone who's going to help provide support. If their system's down, they have SLAs, they need someone to call. So running, managing, and operating once they're up can be harder than the initial builds, but not everyone is thinking about that during the build phase. We can help in the build as well as the run phase. And there's different types of services and that can look in different ways. On the build phase, as Steve said, these solutions are really a full stack type approach. So we have a ProServe team. People do know their workflows, they know what they're trying to accomplish, but they might not have, Steve mentioned there's a lot of new P2P frameworks, new technologies. So say we want to accelerate maybe getting reference implementation, getting that, exercising all these APIs, and then our internal teams can build on that, in subsequent phases. So sometimes people need help with the jump start, and we really want to get people to successful outcomes and, real production, real ROI. So, we're happy to help with strategic engagements. I know we've been already involved in some together, which is great. And sometimes, we have an open platform where people can digitally discover us, just start using us, swipe a credit card, they can build all of that themselves with no help. So there's no, from us, it's just completely frictionless. So we offer different paths depending where they are. They're more of a digital native, or they might be like a gaming company. They might be much more likely to want to just build this and call APIs versus, a different type of enterprise and more traditional industry that is really looking for a partner that can support them all the way down into lines of the protocol and the open source, and as well as be a partner on their journey as they're evolving the solution. So hopefully that gives us a sense of the flavor of how we're helping.
Well, it's interesting. It's very, to your point, there's a lot of breadth, but there's also a lot of depth. So just depending, from our experience, and John, would love to hear your take as well. But what we found, at least at this point, I think someone mentioned like it's still day one. So a lot of institutions and enterprises are still very much looking for, and we'll probably continue looking for years to come, that really kind of hand-holding, trusted advisor type of relationship where you're really working with them end to end, everything from kind of getting through internal stakeholder governance processes all the way through ultimately execution. And I love that you guys are focused on in production, real use cases.
Yeah.
Because I know you guys have seen a lot. So finally, it's really exciting to see different companies coming around to actually operationalizing some of these things. So in terms of kind of going back to your observations, would love to hear from all of you in terms of, what are some of the lessons learned from what you would call first generation or other enterprise blockchains, how, the popularity of different platforms has evolved over time, what you are also hearing from your clients in terms of areas of interest as it relates to these various protocols. Between the three of you have a lot of nuggets of information. So I'd love to kind of hear your take on that.
I'll jump in on this one to start, and I think maybe set the table a little bit for what we see, and maybe I think what the team of Kaleido sees. I think if you take a little bit of a step back, there was this focus, at least with enterprises and some institutions over the course of the past few years, to jump in headfirst into this space and to jump headfirst into targeting that crypto community. What I mean by that is what we've seen traditionally on the crypto side, or the crypto native side, or the digital first side, is crypto people build crypto things for crypto users. So you saw enterprises try and jump in on Twitter and like use crypto like talk, right? And all these acronyms and things to target that audience. And that's a really small audience. And that's an audience that over time has gotten smaller and smaller. It swells a little bit during a market cycle, but then shrinks again. That's a really small total addressable market to be addressing. And we would, I mean, Morgan, you'd hear this, I'd hear this on the regular from very serious enterprises that would give you this long pitch of an amazing idea that they had and then end it, but on blockchain. And that's really the backwards way to be doing this. And I think what we're seeing now, especially, and over the course of the past years, there's been a maturity here where people are just seeing, at least on the blockchain side, right? On the L1 side, on the infrastructure side, is this is a tool, this is a public infrastructure, just like you would think of the internet or financial rails, that enable an application, that enable a use case, not the other way around, right? You're not going to create a use case for blockchain. Like, you use blockchain to figure out a use case, whether it's payments or supply chain or remittance or institutional and traditional finance applications. And I think what we're seeing now is a maturity in the understanding of the technology, what the technology is capable of delivering, and a focus on trying to build new and innovative applications and things that people could do to make people's lives easier, better, use cases that are cheaper and faster than what currently exists, rather than just taking what's existed previously and putting it on chain. I mean, that doesn't really solve things. In a previous life to Ava Labs, I worked at a blockchain firm, a fintech firm that used blockchain that got acquired by a major financial institution. And back then, I feel like things were very siloed. People focused on very specific things, and it took them a long time to figure out how this would grow. And it was slow to kind of adapt and adopt that technology into their stack. It was kind of seen as an outlier. I think where we are now is the technology has kind of arrived to the point that the team was saying earlier. We are at day one now. Now it's no longer a let's try this thing out. It's okay, this is here. How do we really utilize it for good? And I think technology stacks have improved. Layer 1 blockchains have, of course, improved. Avalanche on our side provides speed, sustainability, scalability, and custom environments that allow enterprises to really tailor their application to what they need. And the blockchain is there as an underlying infrastructure rather than the opposite, right? People used to have to tailor their applications or their use cases to fit what the blockchain would allow it to do. That's putting a square peg through a round hole. With Avalanche, I think we provide that canvas to allow people, whether on the permission side or the permissionless side, regardless of the size and scope, to really have that infrastructure layer. And I think you're seeing that adoption, that understanding. More than anything, I think the understanding is there. And when you have enterprise and institutions really understand the technology and understand the capabilities, the ability for innovation and for adoption really grows. And you stop building things for that small group and you start building for your entire market.
Yeah, and maybe to expand on a couple of those points that John was making, I think, back in the Gen 1 approach, often, for, let's say, for an enterprise, lots of science experiments and POCs, all the way down in the technology, down at the bottom, wanting to look under every rock and so forth. And then also that's sort of going down the stack, but then pretty expensive, cumbersome builds, not recognizing the whole technology stack that needs to sit on top of the chain. That was probably one of the biggest, I would say, bear traps that people didn't see coming to just fall into. And all of a sudden, they get to the end of the project and they didn't actually build the use case because they were either had spent all the time down the plumbing, and now they could tell you the difference between a couple of different protocols, but didn't deliver any value back to the business, or all the budget went into like some big build. What we've seen is over time, just like John was saying, a maturing of the stack, the ecosystems, the communities, different components. Knowledge has kind of disseminated more broadly through developer community, so that they understand some of these new tools. Gen 1, we saw all kinds of data ending up on chain. I think people have a lot better understanding now of what data should go on chain, what options you have around privacy, even though that's still an emerging space. But just a lot more knowledge. I think one final trend of like Gen 1 versus to today, I would say, is a lot of those early enterprise projects, you just started with this assumption that it was this entirely private blockchain that they would stand up in some little secret corner, right? And people understood over time that no ecosystem is truly closed if you want the benefits of decentralization. So there's definitely been an arc towards communities like Avalanche for enterprises. It's been a journey. I think one of the exciting things that I hope we talk a bit more about is the advent of like subnets, of this other layer that maybe gives the best of both worlds, right? I think that's what people are really excited about when they look at app chains and that sort of approach of, hey, maybe I can have more dedicated processing, and therefore lower cost, higher transaction volumes, but I can also with anyone else, right? And I can be moving value or collaborating on things and doing really powerful stuff. So those are some, I guess, a few thoughts on what it was like sort of in the early days, and some of the things we've seen shift that really moved the ball forward quite a bit for enterprises that are looking to get into production with their use cases.
I don't think I could have set that transition up any better. So let's talk about subnets. Let's get into it in a little bit more detail. I think just anecdotally from my side, in speaking with a variety of different financial services institutions, a lot of them, especially those that are known to be more like publicly progressive, had originally, a handful or longer of years ago, started on what you guys would call enterprise chains, what we'd call enterprise chains. And a lot of them over time have come to, similar to kind of what you outlined, Steve, realize and appreciate that there are tangible benefits to be had from public blockchain development, DeFi innovation, robust developer community, native integrations that that they simply wouldn't necessarily get if building on their own kind of siloed island. But obviously, to the extent that they build on or benefit from that public development, doesn't mean that they can obfuscate certain laws, rules, and regulations and things that they have to abide by from an internal and industry-wide consideration perspective. So would love to hear actually from all of you, and John included, in terms of how you've seen partners and clients kind of think about subnets. Happy to add my thoughts as well, but maybe let's just dive into that, because I think I don't know how you guys would call it. Is it new gen, next gen of blockchain? But
every week there's a new term.
Sorry?
Every week there's a new term. There's third gen, I think. There's anyway, I'm not going to get
future gen.
I'll jump in real quick on the subnet side, and then I'll leave it to the Kaleido team to talk about their experiences. But I think what we're seeing, right, is the market and participants really appreciating what subnets are. And for those that are watching this that are not as familiar with Avalanche, subnets are pretty much your own customizable chains, or what commonly are being called now app chains. The benefit there being that it's a grouping of Avalanche validators that can secure your own chain. That chain can be private or permission, or public and permissionless. You can set your own gas token, not even have a gas token. You can set your own parameters. You can gate it if you need to as an enterprise, KYC, AML, any kind of screening. It can be geolocated. You can build in whatever safeguards, compliance, and regulatory controls that you need in at the chain level, or it could be completely open. Now, where does that kind of leave us, and why does that matter? I think historically what you've seen is people have had very black and white options, right? Either private, enterprise grade, or public, permissionless. Well, enterprise institutions aren't going to be putting their transactions side by side with a DeFi transaction or an NFT transaction or something that may or may not be sanctioned one day. There's a lot of compliance and regulatory complexities that they cannot be associated with, or even take a risk of being associated with. So they've historically been on the permission side. The limitation on the permission side, or permission only side, historically, is that you're, to your point, Morgan, on an island, right? You don't have that innovation happening within a broader community. You don't have that developer innovation, but more importantly, you don't have the connectivity to other applications and other chains within the ecosystem that can open up collaboration, transfer of value, right? If you think of the internet, you're able to send information from it's a transfer of information. Web3, the whole point here is the transfer of value. And if you have your own chain sitting in an island that's not connected to anything and cannot be connected to anything, you really don't need a blockchain, right? So Subnet's really delivered to the market, I think, something that's been needed, which is a public utility infrastructure layer in which you can put something that's private or permission on top of it, right? I like to think of it as a highway. Some approaches to scaling blockchains are, an off-ramp that takes you on another road and then ends back up on the highway if you wanted to, or putting a lane on top of a lane, right? But the foundation's still there. Subnets for us are like adding lanes onto that highway, right? And that lane can be a diamond lane, it could be a motorcycle lane, it could be a cargo lane, it could be whatever you want, but you're adding lanes so that everything is moving forward. And if you want, you can have connectivity to another chain within the ecosystem or not, or you can permission some others to have connectivity with you, right? So if you think about it this way, if you're an enterprise, you might want to connect to something that has payments. You might want to connect to another enterprise that has loyalty and rewards. And you can start to see how a network of blockchains kind of works, but each within its own framework. And that's, I think, the aha moment that enterprises are now starting to have, that you see on a daily basis, Morgan, and that I've seen over time, is because previously it was just that black and white option. And that did not fit because, again, to what I was saying earlier, you're putting a square peg through a round hole and altering your plans and your projects and your applications to fit the technology. The technology should serve as a blank canvas to really allow you to build whatever it is that you want based on the rules and the parameters and whatever it is. So we're seeing a lot of interest and excitement there. There is an education gap. So we do need to educate and explain to partners that there is a solution that exists for them, that it is different than what's historically been available. And I think the more we do this, the more we're seeing adoption. I think the more the Kaleido team will hopefully see some partners as well.
I mean, I think that's where also the Kaleido team has been really helpful in terms of the education and awareness for, kind of helping to be our megaphones in a certain sense. Because it's just two of us. So, the more education awareness that we get out there, I think the better. And would love to also hear from the Kaleido team. I know that you guys had integrated Avalanche into your offering a few months ago. So I'd love to hear from you and your perspective on kind of how that went, as well as kind of in your discussions with partners and clients, how the idea of subnets comes up and how they're perceived kind of in the broader landscape. And then we can get into some more specific examples from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think as Steve is mentioning, and then John, you mentioned this broader category of app chains is really quite interesting for enterprises, especially those who've been in the space for a while. And, it could be all from, gaming companies saying, we're going to represent our gaming assets as NFTs, in-game assets, and there's millions of assets a day now. So they're looking for a low gas or no gas chain, but they still want to be connected, to the public ecosystem. Someone might want to offboard that NFT and sell it at a marketplace. They might want to bring that in-game asset to another game in their portfolio. So it's really a strong case in enterprise, different use cases emerging depending on the industry and what people are trying to do, where you have that interoperability. And as John was saying, they have a lane on the highway, which they're going in the direction of all the traffic, and they're connected to that. They're a part of that. So that's really important. What we've seen with this sort of next gen approach, and Steve had mentioned, early days was a lot of experimentation. And I think, John, you were alluding to, the technology was almost like a hammer looking for a nail. And now people really are looking for time to value, real business outcomes, real return on investment. It's not just, an experiment. And I think, that's what we've spent, 6 years working with clients on and building Kaleido for. So it's, it's really exciting to be working closely with the Avalanche community, and we're very market driven. So we're committed to running, best of breed open source technologies. So we want to offer flexibility and choice. We don't want anyone to feel, they're locked in to like a closed source implementation of something. We're just really tied to where they can. People want to put their hands on the tech and feel it, have optionality, even in terms of how they're running it. They might want to start with some more help and then over time move to like different options. So that's core to some of what we're doing in terms of offering that flexibility. But just, looking forward, I think the market has taken quite a few twists and turns in the, if you look at pure crypto and what happened towards, in the fall of last year. So, ironically, in the enterprise space and real companies with real products, enterprise, we consider gaming companies still for us is like a company with a business model and customers and products versus more of like a speculative type play. They've really put their focus on, two types of projects, like hey, we are doing something today, but we need to do it better, faster, cheaper. And there's like, we've been running a certain thing in a certain way for decades, and we need to digitally transform, move to the cloud. And we're using these Web3 technologies for this next gen system. And this is something we're going to be running for the next 2 or 3 decades. And then, as John was alluding to, some people saying, hey, we can do business in a completely different way, launch new products, access new customers, provide new services that just weren't even available before. And those can be pretty exciting. So there's a gamut of like business to business, B2B, B2B to C, where they're improving things back office between businesses, but they're able to provide that visibility and better service to customers. Or then some projects that are just directly B2C. But certainly, subnets, the category of app chains is like very exciting across all of those use cases. So if you want to add, Steve.
In the announcement you were alluding to, Morgan, that was something that we announced at the Avalanche Summit in May, I believe.
In Barcelona.
Seems like a long time ago
Great
now.
event.
Yeah. So just a few months ago, there were a couple components to that announcement. One was, I mentioned our product suite at the bottom, the chain infrastructure. So subnets are something that Kaleido can provide. So that was part of the announcement, that those are now available in our blockchain business cloud. But the other part of the announcement was, that subnets are now also integrated in connectivity to Avalanche as well, is now integrated up the rest of the stack as well. So that middleware engine and the asset platform, it's those other tools and services now are just, understand Avalanche, to understand subnets, and so customers are those that are looking to build out ambitious projects and looking for, faster, reliable ways to get, the whole infrastructure stack stood up. We now have something that we can help there.
I want to add something that Steve was saying, and this is a testament to the great work that the Kaleido team is doing, right? We need more people in this space, I think, like the Kaleido team, that are providing these important services, right? Because past times, people would come to us, right, and ask for the same services that you provide. And we don't do that, right? We provide the road, but then somebody has to provide the car and everything that comes with it, right? And people would come to us and be like, hey, we want to go from here to there. Can you do everything? And I'm like, well, here's a road. We needed proper people, you know, with proper backgrounds and proper teams that can follow up, that could live up to the level that's required of enterprise institutions, right? So you mentioned SLAs and you mentioned everything that you have that meets their service requirements, which is completely different than the Web3 or crypto native or digital native people, right? So these are existing businesses with existing systems, with existing frameworks that need to follow those rule sets. So I think, you know, aside from the technology progressing and the ability progressing, I think the participants, to your credit, on the Kaleido team have also been maturing. And even though you've been around this long, I think it's the moment has arrived or is arriving where the real use cases that these enterprise institutions need will be able to be delivered by partners like you guys. So thanks.
And I guess to that end, and Steve, you mentioned it a couple of times, and I think it's really important when we talk about like the top of the stack and the application side of things. I know earlier in the session you mentioned tokenization, which I think we'll have a demo on in a little bit. But can you just say a little bit more in terms of what that application product offering looks like? I know from my kind of focus area, tokenization is hugely top of mind for most financial institutions. So if you could talk, and you know, tokenization obviously could mean financial assets or many other things. But if you could say a little bit more around kind of what that top level product offering looks like, I think that'll just help give a holistic sense of your guys' capabilities on that part.
Yeah. And so when we think about tokenization, I break it up into two basic steps, right? There's the build time activities, and then there's, you know, deploy and run, the runtime activities. So our asset platform has a set of tools to help during build time. Now, the great thing about our ecosystem is there are, you know, open standards and quasi standards that are emerging, right? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel as you look to tokenize. But what we've aimed to do with the build experience is templatize, you know, those emerging standards and break them down into little bits. So ultimately, we want to give you like a Lego kind of experience where you can quickly model out the asset that makes sense for you. And if you think about it like a state machine with various triggers and events and actions, and you know, a life cycle to that asset, you know, these things can get quite complex, right? When you get into the real world. So during build time, a modeling, a scalable approach to modeling out these assets that involves, you know, a Lego-like experience. On the run side, then tokenization, I was mentioning, these assets have a life cycle. So once you've actually deployed them on chain, then it's about that whole life cycle of the asset, you know, who the owner are, and this butts up as you're mentioning, you know, some of the great features about subnets, you know, the fact that you can really completely customize and tailor, you know, the amount of access, whether, you know, the players interacting have been KYC'd, right, or not, all of those sorts of things. So through the life cycle of the asset, our platform that's sitting off chain is indexing, and it's tracking that state machine. It's mirroring and sort of storing all of those events. So you have all of that state and all of that data at rest is at your fingertips. So when we think about the problem of integrating with all those other real world systems that you really need to do in order to get to business value, it becomes a lot easier rather than kind of a clumsy way of trying to do all of that natively through the blockchain. So, then the life cycle of the asset includes, sticky problems like, smart contracts are deployed forever. So, upgradable smart contracts and bringing in patterns like that, and a policy engine that makes it easier to apply business rules and to make that programmatic. And many other things that, maybe we won't have a chance to get into today, but I do think that this is really where we see the industry moving. Maybe first with the slant towards financial services, but really more broadly, across industries. The idea that the blockchain gives you this beautiful sort of tools and experience to model and create digital twins and digital assets for things that exist in the real world and things that exist in the digital world, kind of have those all coexist. And like John was saying, the idea that value is now moving on chain. As this happens, then the possibilities are limitless, right? To the number of use cases that can be built on top of that. But to get there, we need these simple tools, and we need really reliable infrastructure, so that as these things get deployed and they're running, you have good, reliable systems that you can keep building on and extending. And that's our hope and our vision over the coming months and years, as we're just seeing this huge uptick, like you're saying, Morgan, in the amount of asset tokenization and just activity in the space.
Yeah. And I mean, it's fun. It's interesting. Ava Labs' stated mission has always been to digitize and tokenize the world's assets. So it's something, I would agree with everything you said in terms of maybe it starts on financial and expands. I mean, we're also seeing it on the enterprise side of things with loyalty rewards programs, which we can touch on in a little bit. But I think the tokenization concept is really starting to pervade various industries. And obviously now we're starting to see major, executives of large financial institutions touting that the future is tokenization. So definitely, we've definitely seen progress, I think, in terms of mindset shifts, as well as business focuses on this space. Maybe as a next step, would love to kind of get a demo of the tokenization platform and what one of your clients might expect to kind of see in this breakdown of the various pieces that you mentioned, Steve. Maybe if we could take a few minutes to delve into what that looks like, and just kind of see and showcase some of the things that you just reviewed. I think we have Nick. There we go.
Yep. Thanks, Morgan. So my name is Nick Geske. I'm one of the architects and work on the client enablement team here at Kaleido. I want to show one slide just for table setting purposes here. So this gives you a logical view of the stack that Sophia and Steve just provided some high level orientation around. At the bottom, we see the spectrum of connectivity, from private Ethereum clients, Fabric, Corda, all the way to public with app chains and subnets, logically sitting in the middle there. Firefly is the open source engine that kind of powers the orchestration and the back office integrations, connectivity, etc. So that's really the beating heart and the engine of the overall stack. And then on top of it, this is where we've built some sort of application accelerators and some of those Lego blocks and some of those multi-party connectivity pieces that really provide the glue and provide the DNA of some of these real world complex applications. So I'll take you guys into this world right here. We'll look real briefly at how to connect to a subnet, and then we'll start doing hopefully some interesting things with the platform. So this is the asset platform right here. We can see 6 core modules for our business IP, our smart contracts. We can see our connections. We can see our IPFS pointers. We have an NFT accelerator, allows you to really easily define the metadata and the structure of your non-fungible tokens, and then a really rich walled experience. Super quickly, I'll show you how easy and straightforward it is to, point to a subnet or point to, Avalanche net. You just go into this, connections panel right here. Kaleido manages a lot of this infrastructure on your behalf as well. So, any infrastructure that we're running on your behalf can be auto detected, right, by this asset platform instance. If you need to point to, your own custom subnet or, an enterprise RPC endpoint, you would just, use this connect to an external blockchain right here. And the RPC URL is really the, RPC URL and chain ID are the two critical things that you need to provide us. And then some arbitrary name, and if it has boundary security, give us the bearer token or the username password connectivity. I had some of the engineers already doctor up, a namespace pointing to a subnet. So we'll use that to kind of go through the, the subsequent steps inside of the demo. I'll start by showing you sort of an example of those Lego blocks and the templating mechanisms that exist inside of the smart contract module. So this is a kind of a really elegant landing zone to propagate all of your business IP, whether it's just derived from some of those open source, standards, battle hardened, or whether it's your own custom code. So, we provide you out of the box, fungible, non-fungible, and the hybrid implementations. You'll see 14 something, pop in here at some point, and as other standards emerge, right, we'll continue to populate this with those, really, really battle hardened, really mature standards. If you do have something custom, then just go ahead and bring in your own source code or, your own ABI bytecode combination via, a cloud job or, via locally from your laptop or from a VM. So we provide you a bunch of different mechanisms to kind of get your source code into the system, take you through the journey of like what those Lego blocks sort of look like. So just create a token called Ava right here. We can see that we can sort of start populating the source code, right, with different parameters and different configurations. For new developers, this is kind of, very convenient and a very low code to no code easy button that you can also port into an IDE like Remix and, try to extend it, add a new function, add a new event, for example, and, allow that IDE to, compile it, lint it for you on your behalf. This is pretty vanilla ERC 721, so we'll just go with that. I can park it in my own custom directory structure. So, for financial institution, we have different asset classes, for example. We may want to logically create, different directories and hierarchies for those different source codes right there. So we'll go ahead and create that. And what's going to happen behind the scenes is the system's going to compile that source code for us. And it's ultimately going to give us an API or a button that we can press that'll turn this Web3 construct into sort of a Web2 interface. So one of many examples where you're going to see like enterprise easy buttons, all over this experience. So can go ahead and deploy this right here. We just need to point to, the namespace. So this is the one that has a subnet underneath it right here. Use a corresponding wallet, use this guy right here. I'll get to the wallet experience, but you may have seen that really, really quickly right here. There's a really rich spectrum of integrations for wallets, going from, sort of just Kaleido custody, server side key management, to your own on-premise behind a DMZ HSM integration or using a multi-party compute provider. So we can click deploy, again, API behind this to automate it. And then when we want to interact with this source code right here, we'll be able to see sort of a very, very straightforward Web2 paradigm. So we call that an open API for this source code right here. So as soon as that deploys, as soon as we get the receipt back, we'll be able to hop into this. Oops, sorry about that. Be able to hop into that, and we'll be able to generate that open API interface. So back to this right here. And if we click this tab right here, we'll be able to see that we can create an API endpoint. So it's just going to ask me for the specific address, supply that, click next, and then we'll go ahead and create a custom name for those APIs, and we can create those. Spending a bit of time on this because this is just a really, really sort of digestible example of, where the platform provides like a lot of out of the box value right here of, giving you an easy front door. We'll use the highway example, right? Giving you a really easy off ramp to just start talking to this smart contract right here. So instead of using, your favorite Web3 library and all of those, underlying esoteric APIs, Now this turns into use whatever language you want, and it's a asynchronous fire and forget REST API call. So easy door in, and then, you know, just as important, the ability to know what's happening in the network from other folks. So you can customize listeners and tell the system where you want them to be delivered, like a webhook endpoint, or you're going to run a WebSocket listener for any sort of state changes that you care about. So that's the little bit too long example of sort of how we turn, you know, Web3 into Web2. Sprinting through a few of the other features, wallets, I touched on that really briefly, but you can see sort of this really expansive spectrum of connectivity to wallets. And it's not a one size fits all. You can choose to deploy, you know, a really, you know, diverse spectrum of, you know, wallets, HSMs, custodied wallets, etc. And maybe you want to use multiple keys for, you know, certain organizations or users based on smart contracts or based on asset classes as well. So super straightforward. And again, custom URIs and sort of vanity labels inside of all of this, so that there's really elegant, easy integration into, you know, existing OAuth systems or, you know, LDAP, OIDC systems, etc. Last thing to take a peek at, and then I'll show you a few sample apps if we don't run out of time. I just want to look at this sort of NFT accelerator experience that we have. So NFTs have a lot of value, not just in gaming ecosystems, but we can think of, you know, capital markets, we can think of real estate, ton of leeway and ton of, you know, value to tokenize and create digital twins of assets. So this allows you to create what we call templates. This is what I'll call the DNA of the NFT right here. So we have a few examples. I'll just duplicate one of these, and, you know, this is JSON YAML sort of syntax right here, where you can choose the different attributes, the different like sort of metadata, you know, parameters that exist inside of that object right there. And then once you have those defined, you can marry those with what's called a collection right here. So if we go in here and we use like this robot examples, for example, we can hop into this and we can say, create an NFT. It's going to say, hey, what template do you want to marry this to? I'll use this RoboHash API, and we'll just say, I don't know, Ava robot right here. We can do a lazy mint. So rather than doing everything blockchain first, the asset platform Firefly has a local database. So if you need to do things at scale and delegate the experience to end users to claim an NFT, right, on their own time, you just park this in, you know, their email address or some unique UUID that, you know, is going to, you know, basically be tracked when they log into your application experience. So we'll just call this Ava robot again right here. And then we can generate this. So this makes an external API call and pulls us back a random robot. But you can get the idea of, you know, this is as extensible as you want it to be with this modeling language. So, you know, as you have, you know, new design artifacts come into, you know, your back office, or, you know, as you have, you know, new properties come into your portfolio, you don't need to come in here. You just automate this and exercise the API surface that's sitting under everything. So logical time to show that, you know, every time we write code on Kaleido, whether it's just down at the blockchain layer or whether it's in the middleware layer or this top layer in the asset platform, there's an API for every single CRUD operation and every single programmatic operation that you can create. So, you know, if you were to use the asset platform, you probably would get familiar with the interface for a week or 2 weeks, etc. Then you just build your own admin dashboard on top of it. You can start automating the creation of keys if you have a new user come into your app experience, or again, create a new template if you start having those new artifacts, etc. So super straightforward. With the last minute, I'll just show you an example of a couple generic apps that are running. So we'll look at, you know, how straightforward it is to just sort of, you know, create an NFT, right? This is an example of, you know, the metadata of the NFT right here. So I don't know, call this Ava NFT. Arbitrarily give it a description if we want, and then we can just mint that asset right there. So I can add that into the experience. And what we'll see is that the middleware, the asset platform, has a bunch of event listeners and a bunch of subscriptions. So, you know, when you're writing an application, you're going to be able to get all of this rich data given back to you for free. You can start doing like really granular and really rich inspection into the life cycle of assets. We run a block explorer, so you can dive as deep as you want into, you know, smart contract addresses and specific accounts and see everything that they do. So really, really straightforward experience. Once you've created assets, you can also start doing really fun things with them, like bridging those assets to, different EVM compatible blockchains, or, attaching private data to those assets as well. You can also, sort of start facilitating more sophisticated delivery versus payment, or scenarios where we can't put everything on the blockchain and we need to have off-chain encrypted messaging channels. Fly-by tour of like the art of the possible there, but hopefully that gives you a high-level idea. And we would, anyone that has any interest in app chains, Avalanche, subnets, etc., and needs application accelerators, love to talk to you guys and show you some of these capabilities in more detail.
Nick, thank you so much. That was definitely a fly-by tour, but I think it was good to kind of show the kind of broad-based capabilities at all three layers from a Kaleido perspective. So thank you so much. And with that, we are just up on time. So again, want to thank Steve, Sophia, and Nick, as well as John, for joining us today. Also, thank you to everyone that joined and dialed in and listened in. Any concluding thoughts from anyone before we sign off?
Just a huge thanks for inviting us, and really looking forward to working together going forward.
Yeah, and for my part, I've heard some of the Ava Labs leadership team talk about 100 subnets next year, and we just, you think about the stepwise just increase as this technology takes off. It's really dramatic. It's really exciting. We talked about the road, I guess, all the way back to 2015 and some of the shared history that we've all had. Just haven't ever been more excited where we are right now in 2023. The tokenizations and the other themes that we talked about through this hour, really look forward, just ton of respect for Avalanche and the community, the ecosystem, the technology, the roadmap. Really excited for what's coming next, and really grateful to be a partner in it.
I'll just say, that first 100 subnets is going to take a little bit longer than the next 100 that come after it. So with great partners like you guys, we're excited to help onboard these partners faster and more reliable. And we got a lot of exciting stuff coming. So looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.